What's something people don't know about Richard Nixon's controversial decisions? Today we're diving deep into the clamorous, captivating, and often downright baffling presidency of Richard Nixon. Buckle up, because it's going to be a wild ride through scandal, triumph, and everything in between. Richard Nixon, the 37th President of the United States, remains one of the most controversial figures in American history. A man of stark contradictions, he was both a shrewd politician and a master of manipulation. Nixon's legacy is a complex tapestry woven with threads of domestic reform and international diplomacy, all overshadowed by the looming specter of Watergate. Welcome to Enchanting Lore, where we delve into the intricate stories of history. Born in Yorba Linda, California in 1913, Nixon's early life was marked by both hardship and ambition. After serving in the Navy during World War II, he rose quickly through the ranks of politics, serving in both the House of Representatives and the Senate. Nixon's early political career was marked by a staunch anti-communist stance, which earned him both praise and criticism. As vice president under Dwight D. Eisenhower, he gained valuable experience on the world stage, further fueling his presidential aspirations. In 1960, he narrowly lost a presidential bid against John F. Kennedy, a defeat that seemed to only intensify his desire for the White House. 8 years later, after a period of political wilderness, Nixon staged a remarkable comeback, winning the 1968 presidential election. His victory marked the beginning of a tumultuous era in American history, one that would forever be intertwined with the name Richard Nixon. Nixon inherited a nation deeply divided by the Vietnam War and grappling with social and racial unrest. Protests against the war raged across college campuses while cities simmered with racial tensions following the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. It was a time of immense societal upheaval, with traditional values being challenged and the very fabric of American society seemingly strained at its seams. Nixon, a master of sensing the national mood, recognized the anxieties of what he called the silent majority, those Americans who felt unheard amidst the tumult. He skillfully tapped into these anxieties, promising to restore law and order to the streets and bring an end to the Vietnam War. These promises resonated with many Americans, but they also revealed a darker undercurrent of Nixon's political strategy, one that often exploited societal divisions for political gain. On the domestic front, Nixon surprised many with his pragmatic approach to policy. He implemented several liberal initiatives, including the establishment of the Environmental Protection Agency, a landmark achievement in environmental regulation. He also expanded Social Security benefits and oversaw the desegregation of Southern schools, albeit often reluctantly. These actions seemed at odds with Nixon's conservative image, revealing a complex and often contradictory figure. However, alongside these progressive measures, Nixon also pursued policies that reflected his deep-seated suspicion of government bureaucracy and his belief in individual responsibility. He implemented New Federalism, a policy aimed at decentralizing federal power and giving more authority to state and local governments. Nixon's law and order rhetoric, while appealing to some, often masked a more troubling reality. His administration's war on drugs, launched in 1971, disproportionately targeted minority communities and laid the groundwork for the mass incarceration crisis that continues to plague the United States today. Furthermore, Nixon's unwavering pursuit of executive power and his deep distrust of his political opponents led him down a dangerous path. He authorized illegal wiretaps on journalists and political rivals, and his administration engaged in a pattern of secrecy and deception that ultimately culminated in the Watergate scandal. The Watergate scandal, which began with a seemingly minor break-in at the Democratic National Committee headquarters, would come to define Nixon's presidency and cast a long shadow over his legacy. I bet you didn't know how deep the Watergate scandal really went. The walls close in Watergate Unfolds. June 17, 1972. A seemingly insignificant break-in at the Watergate Hotel, the Democratic National Committee headquarters, 5 men connected to Nixon's re-election campaign are caught attempting to bug the offices. What initially seemed like a third-rate burglary quickly snowballed into a full-blown political earthquake. Investigative journalists, notably Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein of the Washington Post, relentlessly pursued the story, uncovering a trail of dirty tricks, hush money, and obstruction of justice that reached the highest levels of the Nixon administration. With each revelation, the scandal widened, ensnaring more of Nixon's inner circle. The nation watched, captivated and horrified, as the president vehemently denied any involvement, proclaiming, "I am not a crook," in a now infamous televised address. But the evidence mounted, painting a picture of a White House consumed by paranoia, secrecy, and a chilling disregard for the rule of law. Central to the unraveling of Watergate was the existence of a secret taping system in the Oval Office, installed at Nixon's own behest. The tapes, when their existence was revealed, promised to hold the key to unlocking the truth behind the Watergate break-in and the subsequent cover-up. A fierce legal battle ensued, with Nixon claiming executive privilege in an attempt to shield the tapes from investigators. The Supreme Court, however, ruled against Nixon, forcing him to surrender the recordings. What those tapes revealed sent shockwaves through the nation. Nixon's own words implicated him in the cover-up, exposing a pattern of deceit and obstruction of justice. The tapes also unveiled a darker side of Nixon, revealing a man prone to profanity, bigotry, and a disturbing willingness to use the power of the presidency for personal and political gain. As the weight of evidence against Nixon became insurmountable, the House of Representatives began impeachment proceedings. The nation held its breath, the political climate thick with tension and uncertainty. The very foundation of American democracy seemed to hang in the balance. 3 articles of impeachment were drawn up, charging Nixon with obstruction of justice, abuse of power, and contempt of Congress. The evidence against him was overwhelming, and it became clear that Nixon faced almost certain impeachment in the House and a very real possibility of conviction in the Senate. I bet you didn't know the dramatic moment of Nixon's resignation. Faced with the prospect of impeachment and removal from office, Nixon made a fateful decision. On August 8, 1974, in a somber address from the Oval Office, Richard Nixon announced his resignation as President of the United States. "In all the decisions I have made in my public life," Nixon stated, "I have always tried to do what was best for the nation." He acknowledged that he no longer had the support of Congress or the American people to continue in office. Nixon's resignation marked the end of a tumultuous and deeply divisive chapter in American history. It was a stark reminder that even the most powerful person in the world is not above the law, and that the institutions of democracy, though tested, had ultimately prevailed. Richard Nixon's legacy remains deeply complex and contested to this day. The shadow of Watergate continues to loom large, forever tarnishing his accomplishments and casting doubt on his motivations. The scandal eroded public trust in government and left an indelible mark on American politics. Yet Nixon's presidency was also marked by significant achievements, particularly in the realm of foreign policy. He sided with Pakistan against India in the Bangladesh Liberation War. He opened relations with China, pursued détente with the Soviet Union, and ended American involvement in the Vietnam War. These were landmark achievements that reshaped the geopolitical landscape. Nixon's domestic policies, too, were a mix of progressive reforms and more troubling actions. He established the Environmental Protection Agency, expanded Social Security, and oversaw the desegregation of Southern schools. However, his law and order policies and war on drugs had lasting negative consequences, particularly for minority communities. While Watergate dominates the narrative of Nixon's presidency, his actions on the world stage were equally significant, if not more so. Nixon inherited a world on edge, locked in the ideological struggle of the Cold War, with the Vietnam War raging and tensions simmering between superpowers. Nixon, a staunch anti-communist throughout his career, surprised many with his pragmatic approach to foreign policy. He believed in realpolitik, a philosophy that prioritized national interest and strategic advantage over ideological purity. This approach led him to make some bold and unexpected moves on the global chessboard. In March 1971, East Pakistan erupted in conflict. Bengali nationalists fought against Pakistan's military regime. Nixon backed Pakistan, fearing Soviet dominance if India intervened. Nixon sent Task Force 74 to the Bay of Bengal, signaling support for Pakistan. But no combat ensued. Behind the scenes, secret talks with China were underway. Nixon covertly supplied Pakistan, violating U.S. sanctions. The war ended. Bangladesh gained sovereignty. India, resentful, remembered America's role. Later, India tested nukes. The world shifted and alliances evolved. Exposing the pivotal moment in Cold War history, Nixon's historic trip to China in 1972. For over 2 decades, the United States had refused to recognize the communist government in Beijing. Nixon saw a strategic opportunity in China's rift with the Soviet Union. His week-long visit was a watershed moment in the Cold War. The image of Nixon with Chairman Mao sent shockwaves around the world. Nixon's approach to the Soviet Union was equally pragmatic, albeit fraught with its own set of challenges. He understood that the nuclear arms race posed an existential threat to humanity, and that dialogue with Moscow was essential, even as the two superpowers remained locked in ideological conflict. Nixon and his national security advisor, Henry Kissinger, engaged in a series of high-stakes negotiations with the Soviets, culminating in the signing of the Strategic Arms Limitation Treaty, or SALT I, in 1972. This landmark agreement placed limits on the growth of both countries' nuclear arsenals, marking a significant step towards reducing Cold War tensions. Nixon also pursued other avenues of cooperation with Moscow, including expanded trade and cultural exchanges. This period of easing tensions, known as détente, offered a glimmer of hope that the Cold War might eventually end peacefully. However, détente was a fragile construct built on a foundation of mutual distrust and suspicion. I bet you didn't know the complex legacy Nixon left behind, a legacy of broad triumphs and contradictions. Nixon's foreign policy legacy is as complex and contradictory as the man himself. He achieved remarkable breakthroughs in relations with China and the Soviet Union, ushering in a period of reduced tensions and laying the groundwork for future cooperation. His handling of the Vietnam War, however, remains deeply controversial. While he ultimately negotiated an end to American involvement, his escalation of the conflict, including the secret bombing of Cambodia, had devastating consequences and further polarized American society. Nixon's foreign policy was driven by a combination of pragmatism, a desire to advance American interests, and a deep-seated belief in the importance of American leadership on the world stage. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe. Leave a comment below and let us know your thoughts. And don't forget to suggest new topics for our future videos.